what do you think the price is reflecting? I mean, I'm having a hard time understanding $71 oil when you have Iran probably coming back at some point. India demand is still going to be quite weak, and we haven't really sorted out all the variants in emerging markets. How do you understand that?
Well, so we as we put in a recent report, we have the oil macro bulls versus the micro bears, right? And the micro bears are all pointing out to the issues you just highlighted. India's in the midst of a big COVID wave, and you have Iran coming back. But if you look at the macro picture is brightening pretty quickly. We know the vaccines are very effective, which means that the U.S. is coming back rapidly, and Americans are taking onto the roads, and soon Europeans will be taking over to the roads as well. So, and then on top of that, I think you have other issues such as inflation taking up very meaningfully. Remember, oil has been a big laggard across the commodity complex, but also just generally across all goods in the economy. Oil has been lagging because demand's been lagging, right? So
you don't think that $71 oil is going to see some demand destruction?
No, I don't think it's going to see demand destruction at 71. I think we will see, like I said, this year we talked about $70 a barrel or so being a bit of a lid on the market because of the OPEC spare capacity, which is why today's conference was so important. I thought it was interesting that there's no signal on the OPEC side that they'll be increasing production any faster. Clearly, when the market wants more oil, remember, we're at 95 million barrels a day of demand or so, ramping up quickly to 98, 99 million barrels a day. So I guess the market wants more barrels from OPEC, and it probably needs more barrels from Iran. So at this point, the ramp up into year end is requires just more production, really.
I mean, what we've also heard, though, from China is that they don't seem to like these high commodity prices. I feel like, and I'm really referring more to the bulk and the base and industrial metals than oil, but nonetheless. What do you think that China's capacity is to try and put a top on commodity prices? Can they do it in the same way that they did it 20 years ago?
Well, look, at the end of the day, it's an issue of policy. If you tighten credit policy, if you tighten monetary policy, and you tighten fiscal policy, for sure, you're going to put a lid on commodity markets. The question is, do you feel that you are at a point where you're going to end up getting broadening inflation, right? Because I think central bankers are not generally too concerned about a little bit of commodity inflation. They're worried about broadening inflation, which is why I think commodity markets are going to mostly focus from here on, particularly on what the Fed says, what the European Central Bank says. Tapering talk is going to become a central point of discussion for commodity markets in the next couple of months. And I think ultimately central bankers keep sending the same message, which is, oh, we still have a lot of people out of a job, and we're not going to be tightening policy or reducing tapering anytime soon. All of those messages, I think, will keep setting the commodity markets on fire. So central bankers are walking a tightrope. And my sense is that inflation is just picking up broadly, not just in commodities. So that in itself could end up being a bit of a lid. So the COVID pandemic seems to be kind of increasingly behind us, at least from an oil demand perspective.
So does that mean when you say commodities on fire, would that also imply gold is going to get back on fire? I'm having a hard time with that one today.
Well, gold is a difficult one always, right? Because gold loves periods of disinflation where central banks have to push a huge amount of money into the system. That doesn't seem to be the case going forward. But I do think that if oil, let's say, and we've talked about this, like oil potentially ripping all the way to $100 a barrel over the next couple of years, if we end up getting there, I think gold is actually going to perform well in that environment, because if we get to $100 oil, most likely it's because central banks are lagging behind, and gold's going to like that. But it's not necessarily the same kind of hot commodity that it may have been at the beginning of the pandemic, when plans to reflate the economy were astronomical. Here now we're getting, of course, as you know, Republicans trying to restrict the amount of spending into infrastructure. So now you're getting the other side of things. And gold, I think gold's, by the way, is found at the bottom, but I just don't see the exponential upside that we could have seen maybe at the beginning of the pandemic.
All right. That's a fair point. Last question for you, and this kind of ties in the news from last week. You also had a report out about carbon prices and a carbon tax today. And I'm wondering if you're looking at, say, 80 or in a bull case, $100 oil prices, and then you also have climate activist pressure. What does an oil company do? Like, what happens to a U.S. oil company, and then how does that affect the supply dynamic?
It's a great question. And, what we said on the carbon piece, and again, carbon is really coming against COVID in a weird kind of way, in the sense that we all want to move more. I think the work from home, ironically, work from home situation leads to more driving, not less driving, because people actually end up living farther away and also end up doing a lot of things on their car during their work days that they're not in the office. So we know that's actually going to lead to probably more demand. We just don't have the bandwidth to supply it, to your point, for two reasons. First, because we had a supply shock last year, as well as a demand shock. But also because, as you pointed out, the push towards the energy transition, including the International Energy Agency comments, are asking companies not to invest in oil. So you have more demand, less supply.
Francisco.
There's only one way to get people back to buses, and
We
that's a
gotta
higher
leave it
price.
there.